The deep space void around Kepler-7 erupted in brilliant flashes as Vorthok plasma cannons tore through the planet's atmosphere. Commander Velthon gripped the command rail of his flagship, watching helplessly as another world died. The mining colony had housed 3 million Kithra civilians. Now, it was nothing but cooling rock and ash. Another transmission from the surface has gone dark. His communications officer whispered, her tentacles trembling as she worked the controls. The fear in her voice made Velthon's heart sink even deeper. In all his cycles of service, he had never seen his crew this terrified. The holographic display showed the grim reality. Red markers indicated dead worlds, 17 of them now, stretching across the outer rim of collective space. Each marker represented millions of lives lost, entire civilizations wiped out by the Vorthok war machine. The enemy fleet moved with mechanical precision, destroying everything in their path. How long until they reach Kythera Prime? Velthon asked, though he dreaded the answer. 3 cycles, maybe 4 if we can slow them down, replied his tactical officer. But they both knew the truth. The collective had no military to speak of. Their ships were built for trade and exploration, not war. Their weapons were mining tools and asteroid cutters, useless against the hegemony's battle cruisers. Velthon walked to the observation deck, staring out at the stars that had once represented hope and discovery. Now they seemed cold and distant, indifferent to the suffering below. The Vorthok believed in something they called genetic supremacy. The idea that only the strongest species deserved to survive. They had been systematically eliminating what they considered weak civilizations for decades. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Science Officer Kindar approached with unusual excitement in her movements. Commander, I may have found something. Do you remember the artifact we discovered in the Void Sector 20 cycles ago? Velthon nodded. The mysterious device had been found floating in empty space, clearly artificial, but unlike anything in their databases. The science teams had studied it for years without success. It seemed to be some kind of communication device, but they could never activate it. I've been running new scans since the attacks began, Kindar continued. The device is responding to our distress. It's almost like it can sense our desperation. The quantum patterns are aligning, and I believe we can finally activate it. What will it do? Send a signal across the galaxy. A call for help to anyone who might be listening.
Velthon
Felt a flicker of hope. It was a desperate gamble, but they had nothing left to lose. Do it. In the depths of space, the ancient beacon came alive for the first time in millennia. Strange energies coursed through its crystalline structure as it began broadcasting a message of pure desperation across the stars. The signal moved faster than light itself, reaching into dark corners of the galaxy where unknown civilizations might be waiting. 47 light-years away, Captain Hyan Woo Kim was enjoying his 3rd cup of coffee when alarms began blaring throughout Luna Station. The massive deep space monitoring facility orbited Earth's moon, its sensors constantly searching for signs of life beyond the solar system. For decades, they had found nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional asteroid. Captain, you need to see this, Lieutenant Yoon-ji Park called from her station. Her usually calm voice carried an edge of excitement that made everyone in the command center look up from their work. Hyan-woo set down his coffee and walked over to her console. The main display showed a complex wave pattern unlike anything he had ever seen. What am I looking at? It's a signal from beyond our solar system. The complexity is off the charts. Look at these mathematical sequences, these harmonic frequencies. This isn't natural, sir. This is artificial intelligence trying to communicate. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. First, contact. The moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries was finally happening. But as the translation computers began processing the signal, the excitement turned to something else entirely. Captain Yoonji's voice was barely a whisper now. I think they're asking for help. The raw emotion in the signal was unmistakable. Even without full translation, fear, desperation, the kind of terror that transcended species barriers. Someone out there was dying, and they had reached across the void to ask for salvation. Within an hour, the signal had been relayed to Earth. Emergency sessions convened in every major capital as world leaders tried to process what they were seeing. The United Earth Defense Force had been established after the Resource Wars, but it had never faced anything like this. Admiral Donghain Lee stood before the Global Defense Council, a translated message playing on screens around the room. The alien voices spoke of worlds burning, of children crying in the darkness, of an enemy that showed no mercy. The images were fuzzy but clear enough to understand. Entire planets reduced to lifeless rocks, refugee ships fleeing through space, with nowhere to run. The choice before us is simple, Admiral Lee said, his voice carrying the weight of history. We can pretend we never heard this message, or we can do what humans have always done when innocents are threatened. We can fight. Debate that followed was surprisingly brief. Earth had spent centuries preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact. They had never considered that first contact might be a plea for help from the victims of genocide. But the decision, when it came, was unanimous. We cannot ignore this, Admiral Lee declared as the final vote was tallied. If someone is calling for help, we answer. It's what makes us human. The shipyards above Earth had never seen anything like it. What normally took months of careful planning happened in mere days. Admiral Donghain Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as supply ships raced between the massive orbital platforms. Weapons that had been in storage since the Resource Wars were being mounted on exploration vessels. Cargo haulers were being converted into troop transports. "Sir, the Beijing and Moscow shipyards report they are ready," announced his aide. "The Australian Deep Space Facility has finished loading supplies on the support ships." Lee nodded, studying the tactical display. 60 ships, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. The flagship Incheon was a massive battlecruiser, its hull bristling with railguns and missile pods. Around it moved destroyers, frigates, and cruisers from every nation on Earth. The sight would have been impossible just a week ago. But the alien distress signal had done what centuries of diplomacy couldn't manage. It had united humanity against a common enemy. Captain So-Young Choi ran her hand along the command chair of the destroyer Busan. The ship was smaller than the flagship, but fast and deadly, armed with the latest plasma torpedoes and kinetic weapons. Her crew of 200 had volunteered to a person when they learned about the mission. No one had been ordered to go. Everyone had chosen to fight. "Captain, engineering reports fusion drives are at optimal efficiency," called out Lieutenant Jaewon Park from his station. "We're ready for hyperspace. Jump on your command." These weren't soldiers, most of them. They were explorers, scientists, engineers who had joined the Space Force to discover new worlds. Now they were heading to war to save aliens they had never seen. "Ma'am, incoming message from your daughter," the communications officer announced quietly. So-Young's heart tightened. Haijin was only 16, safe in the underground. "Schools of New Seoul. Put it through to my private channel." "Mom, I know you can't tell me where you're going, but I saw the news. Everyone's talking about the aliens who need help. I'm proud of you." Her daughter's voice was trying to be strong, but So-Young could hear the fear underneath. "Come home. Safe, okay? I will, sweetheart, I promise." So-Young closed the channel and took a deep breath. This was why they were fighting. Not just for the aliens crying for help, but for their own children who deserved to grow up in a galaxy where the strong protected the weak. The hyperspace jump was smooth, stars stretching into lines of light as the human fleet entered the void between dimensions. They were heading toward coordinates provided by the alien signal. Following a trail of desperate transmissions deeper into unknown space, 3 days into their journey, Insan Minho Kong's voice cut through the quiet. "Routine of the bridge watch. Ma'am, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures ahead. They're not moving in formation like military vessels." So-Young moved to the sensor station, studying the readings. The signatures were erratic, some ships barely maintaining hyperspace stability. How many? At least 40, possibly more. There? Drives are damaged, running on emergency power. Signal Admiral Lee. We found survivors. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, the sight that greeted them would haunt every crew member for the rest of their lives. Dozens of alien ships drifted through space, their hulls scarred by weapons fire. Some were barely holding together, atmosphere leaking from massive tears in their sides. These weren't warships. They were civilian vessels, packed with refugees fleeing the destruction of their worlds. The first visual contact happened when Captain So Young opened a channel to the largest refugee ship. The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything humans had ever imagined, her eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin that shifted color with emotion, tentacles where humans would have hair. But the expression was universally recognizable. Pure. "Please," the alien creature whispered in broken English, their translation software struggling with the unfamiliar language. "Please don't hurt us. We have children aboard." Soyoung felt her heart break. "We're not here to hurt you. We received your distress signal. We've come to help." The alien skin shifted from fear gray to something that might have been hope blue. "You are the ones who answered. But why? We are nothing to you. Because someone called for help, and we answered. That's what we do." More alien ships began responding to human communications. The stories they told painted a picture of horror that made the human crews clench their fists in anger. The Vorthok hegemony moved through space like a plague, destroying everything they considered inferior. They didn't just conquer worlds, they sterilized them, leaving nothing alive. Kindar, Kithra scientist, whose research ship had barely escaped the destruction of her homeworld, was brought aboard the Inchin to brief Admiral Lee. Her eyes were dim with exhaustion and grief as she showed him tactical displays of Vorthok ships. "They call themselves the perfect species," she explained, her tentacles curling with distress. "They believe the galaxy belongs only to the strong. Everyone else must die." "How many worlds have they destroyed?" Lee asked. "In our sector alone? 37 civilizations? Billions of lives." Kindar looked directly at the human admiral. "Why do you do this? Your species is unknown to us. You could hide in your distant system and be safe. Why risk everything for strangers?" Admiral Lee was quiet for a moment, thinking of his own children back on Earth. "Because if we don't stop them here, they'll eventually come for us too, because it's the right thing to do." The Kithra scientist stared at him in amazement. "The other species call your world a death planet. You say nothing could survive there except monsters. But you're not monsters, are you?" "No," Soyoung said from where she stood listening. "We're not monsters. We're just humans who refuse to. Let bullies win." Kindar's skin shifted to a color the humans had learned meant deep respect. Then perhaps there is hope after all. The Vorthok have never faced Deathworlders before. Admiral Lee smiled grimly as he looked out at his fleet, human ships moving protectively around the damaged refugee vessels. They're about to learn what Earth teaches its children. Never start a fight, but always finish one. The hyperspace exit at Kepler-12 was like stepping into hell. Admiral Dong Hyen Lee watched his tactical display light up with enemy contacts. As his fleet dropped back into normal space, 53 Vorthok ships hung in orbit around the last free Kithra world, their massive siege cannons charging for planetary bombardment. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildup from the enemy fleet," reported Lieutenant Sujin Han from her sensor station. "They're preparing to glass the planet." Lee could see the Kithora refugee ships clustered around their homeworld like frightened children. Millions of beings who had fled the destruction of their colonies, now trapped with nowhere left to run. The Vorthok dreadnoughts were positioning themselves for systematic extermination. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee," he broadcast to his fleet. "We came here to save lives. Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of, weapons free. Engage. At will." The first human torpedo spread launched before the Vorthok even realized they had company. Captain Soyoung Choi's destroyer Busan led the charge. Her ship screaming through space at a speed that defied Vorthok understanding of physics. Human ships weren't built for comfort or intimidation. They were built to kill. Commander Thokvel of the Vorthok Third Fleet barely had time to process what was happening. His sensors showed impossible readings. These unknown ships were accelerating at forces that should have liquefied their crews. Their weapons fired with precision that suggested advanced targeting computers, but their movement patterns were chaotic, unpredictable. "What species fights like this?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. The answer came too late. Human plasma. Torpedoes slammed into the Vorthok flagship's shields, overloading them in seconds. The humans didn't fight like any civilized species. They fought like animals cornered in a cage. Captain Jae-soon Park's corvette Daegu danced between the massive Vorthok cruisers, her small size making her nearly impossible to target. His weapons officer, Ensign Young-soo Kim, had grown up playing video games and treated the battle like the ultimate gaming challenge. Target their weapon clusters, Park ordered. Make them hurt. The Daegu's railguns spat tungsten slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The rounds punched through Vorthok armor like paper, destroying weapon systems and creating massive decompression events. But the enemy was learning, adapting their targeting to account for human speed. A Vorthok plasma bolt caught the Daegu amidships, tearing through her engine compartment. The ship spun out of control, atmosphere bleeding from a dozen wounds. Engine. Room reports total failure, called out his chief engineer. We're dead in space, sir. Park looked at his crew, seeing the same grim determination in their eyes that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history. They all knew what came next. All hands, abandon ship. Emergency evacuation protocols. Sir, what about you? Asked Young-soo. I'm staying. Someone needs to fly this ship. Park's smile was cold as winter. And I just spotted our target. The massive Vorthok battlecruiser Dominion was moving to finish off a cluster of human frigates. Park aimed his dying ship directly at the enemy. Vessel's command section and pushed the manual. Override on his fusion reactor. The explosion that followed could be seen from the planet's surface. The Daegu died in a ball of nuclear fire, taking the Dominion and 2 escort destroyers with her. The blast was so intense it temporarily blinded sensors across the battle zone. Confirmed kill on enemy capital ship, reported Lieutenant Sujin. Han, her voice tight with emotion. Captain Park is gone, sir. Admiral Lee closed his eyes for a moment, honoring the sacrifice. Then he opened them and returned to the battle. Continue the attack? Make their deaths mean something? The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, coordinating their strikes with an efficiency that terrified the Vorthok. When one ship was damaged, others moved to protect it. When enemy formations tried to concentrate their fire, human ships scattered, like leaves in the wind, only to reform and strike from unexpected angles. Commander Thokvel watched his neat battle formations crumble under the human assault. These creatures didn't follow any tactical doctrine he recognized. They improvised, adapted, and most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy the chaos of battle. Sir, we've intercepted their communications, his intelligence officer reported. They're from something called a Class 12 Deathworld. Their entire evolution was shaped by constant warfare. The words sent a chill through Thokvel's exoskeleton. A Class 12 Deathworld was theoretical, a planet so hostile that only the most aggressive predators could survive. The idea that an entire species had evolved on such a world was nightmare fuel for civilized beings. They evolved to fight or die. Every single day, the intelligence officer continued, combat isn't just warfare to them, it's natural selection. Captain So-young Choi's Busan had taken heavy damage, but was still fighting. Her crew worked with mechanical precision, loading torpedoes and manning damage control stations, while the ship shook under enemy fire. Her daughter's face flashed. Through her mind, giving her strength? Torpedo room's report, we're down to our last spread, called out her weapons officer. Then we make them count, So-young replied. All remaining torpedoes full spread. The Bizen's final torpedo salvo struck the Vorthok command ship just as its shields failed. The explosions tore through the vessel's hull, reaching the main reactor. The resulting blast took out 3 nearby ships and sent shockwaves through the enemy formation. But the humans were paying a price too. 12 ships had been destroyed, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. Each loss was a hammer blow to the survivors, but they fought on with the fury of those who refused to surrender. The tide turned when the remaining Vorthok ships began trying to retreat. They had come to execute a helpless species and instead found themselves facing the products of a world that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing. Sir, enemy ships are breaking formation, reported Lieutenant Han. They're trying to escape. Let them go. Admiral Lee ordered. "But make sure they remember this day." When the battle ended, the space around Kepler-12 was filled with debris and the wreckage of 50 ships. 37 Vorthok vessels had been destroyed or crippled, while the human fleet had lost 12 ships and nearly 3,000 crew members. But on the planet below, 2 million Kithra refugees watched the human ships move into protective formation around their world. They had been saved by strangers from a distant star, beings who had crossed the galaxy to answer their call for help. The message that went out from Kepler-12 traveled at light speed to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had announced itself to the universe in the most dramatic way possible. It declared war on genocide itself, and they had won their first battle in the depths of space. Other species intercepted the transmissions from the battle. The recordings showed human ships fighting with a savagery that both terrified and inspired. The galaxy would never be the same. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were on the side of the angels. The Vorthok mining facility at Proxima 7 was supposed to be impossible to reach. Hidden deep in an asteroid field, protected by automated defense platforms and a full squadron of patrol ships. It supplied fuel for half the hegemony's third fleet. The facility's commander, Sub-Admiral Kethron, had been assured by intelligence that no enemy could penetrate their defenses. He was wrong, Captain. Wu Jinyun's stealth ship Guangzhou drifted silently through the asteroid field, her hull coated with adaptive camouflage that made her nearly invisible to sensors. Behind her, 5 more human stealth ships moved like ghosts between the floating rocks. They had been studying Vorthok defensive patterns for weeks, learning their routines, finding their blind spots. "Target acquired," whispered Lieutenant Minyong Lee from the weapons station. "Fuel depot is directly ahead. Minimal guard presence." Wu Jin smiled grimly. The Vorthok had made a fatal mistake. They thought like conquerors, always assuming their enemies would meet them in open battle. Humans thought like survivors. Struck where the enemy was weakest, when they least expected it. All ships, begin the attack. Remember, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win. The assault began with silence. Human infiltration drones, small enough to be mistaken for space debris, attached themselves to the facility's communication arrays. Within minutes, the mining station was cut off from the outside galaxy, its distress calls dying in electronic static. Then came the explosions. Precisely placed charges detonated throughout the facility's infrastructure. Fuel lines ruptured, sending deadly gases venting into space. Power systems overloaded in cascading failures. The Vorthok defenders found themselves fighting fires and desperately trying to evacuate civilians, while human ships struck from the darkness. "Sir, we've lost contact with mining station Proxima 7, reported Intelligence Chief Morgan to Supreme Commander Thakver. His voice carried a new tone that Thakver had never heard before. Fear. How? That facility was supposed to be impregnable. The humans, sir. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They study us, learn our weaknesses, then exploit them with surgical precision. In the past week alone, they've destroyed 17 supply depots, 6 communication hubs, and 2 shipyards." Thakver's mandibles clicked in frustration. The hegemony had conquered 47 star systems using overwhelming force and intimidation. Their enemies had always met them in direct battle, where Vorthok's superior technology and numbers guaranteed victory. But these humans fought differently. They struck from shadows, disappeared before reinforcements could arrive, and always seemed to know exactly where to hurt the most. Captain Ian Soo Kim's heavy cruiser Seoul had become legendary among both human and Vorthok forces. Scarred by battle damage from 7 different engagements, the ship looked like it should have been scrapped months ago. Instead, Kim's crew had turned their wounds into strengths. "Sir, enemy patrol approaching from Sector 7, reported Ensign Hae-Won Park. 3 destroyers and a light cruiser." Kim studied the tactical display, his experienced eyes picking out patterns that younger officers might miss. The Vorthok were trying to trap him again, using their standard pincer movement. They had tried this exact tactic in their last 3 encounters. They're learning slowly, Kim muttered. But we're learning faster. Engineering, can you give me that reactor surge we discussed? Chief Engineer Sang-Ho Choi's voice crackled over the intercom. It's dangerous, sir. We could blow ourselves up, but will it work? It'll work. The question is whether we'll survive it, Kim grinned. That was the difference between humans and everyone else in the galaxy. Other species calculated acceptable risks. Humans calculated acceptable sacrifices. Do it. The Soul's fusion reactor suddenly blazed beyond its safety limits, channeling power directly into the ship's engines and weapon systems. The cruiser leaped forward with acceleration that should have been impossible for a ship her size, closing the distance to the enemy formation in seconds. The Vorthok commanders barely had time to register what was happening before human plasma. Cannons tore through their shields. Kim's gunners had learned to target specific weak points in Vorthok ship design, focusing their fire on the vulnerable junction between the enemy's main hull and engine. Section 2. Vorthok destroyers exploded in rapid succession, their fusion cores breaching in brilliant flashes. The surviving ships tried to retreat, but the Soul was already among them, her point defense systems shredding their armor at close range. Another victory for the Deathworlders, Kim announced to his crew. But don't celebrate yet. Intelligence says they're sending bigger fleets after us. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the entire planet had transformed into a war machine. The shipyards that had once built exploration vessels and cargo haulers now worked around the clock, producing warships. The lunar construction facilities had been expanded 3 times in as many months. Automated systems, churning out weapons and ammunition. President Chang-wook Han stood in the command center beneath Seoul, watching reports stream in from across the galaxy. Every human ship in space was now part of the war effort, from massive battle cruisers to tiny reconnaissance drones. Sir, production reports from the orbital platforms, his aide announced. We're now launching 2 new ships every day, and our retrofitting program has converted 80% of the civilian fleet to military use. Han nodded grimly. The entire human race had united behind a single goal, protecting their new alien friends from extinction. It was perhaps the first time in human history that every nation, every corporation, every individual was working toward the same objective. How many ships do we have in active service now? 437, sir, with more joining the fleet every week. The numbers would have been impossible to believe just months ago. But humanity had discovered something about themselves that surprised even them. When fighting for others, they were capable of achievements that seemed miraculous. Supreme Commander Thakfur reviewed the latest intelligence reports with growing horror. The humans weren't just fighting as fleets. They were learning from every encounter, adapting their tactics, sharing information across their entire species with a speed that defied belief. Sir, we've lost the entire Kepler Nebula sector, reported his trembling aide. The humans have somehow turned our own defense satellites against us. They're using our own weapons to destroy our supply convoys. How many ships do these Deathworlders have? Thakfur demanded. Intelligence suggests... all of them, sir. Their entire species appears to be mobilizing. Every human ship in space is now a potential threat. The truth was even more terrifying than the Vorthok realized. Humanity had discovered their true strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to unite against a common threat, to transform their entire civilization into a weapon of protection for those who couldn't protect themselves. In the depths of space, human ships moved like ghosts through Vorthok territory, striking at targets of opportunity and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Each attack was planned with mathematical precision, each victory teaching them new ways to hurt their enemies. The hunter had become the hunted, and the Vorthok were learning what every predator on Earth had discovered over millions of years. Humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they refused to give up. They never stopped learning how to fight. The skies above Vortok Prime burned with the fury of Smell Squall Dock. 100 suns as the final battle raged. Captain Yunsu Lee's assault ship Daejin screamed through the planet's atmosphere, dodging plasma fire from the surface defense batteries. Behind her, 50 human dropships followed in tight formation, carrying the elite Marines who would end this war once and for all. "Ma'am, we're taking heavy fire from the Capital District," reported Corporal Ji-Hoon Kim from the gunner's position. "Their defenses are stronger than expected." Yun-Su gritted her teeth as another explosion rocked her ship. The Vorthok had turned their capital into a fortress with weapon emplacements on every building and automated defense drones swarming the air. But humans had learned something important during their months of fighting. Vorthok technology was impressive, but it couldn't match human determination. "Okay, all units, this is actual," she broadcasted to her Marines. "Remember why we're here? Every Cathora child who died in their genocidal campaign, every world they burned, every family they destroyed. Today we end their reign of terror." The first wave of Marines hit the ground running, their powered armor absorbing the impact of high-velocity drops. Staff Sergeant Cuman Park led Alpha Squad through the maze of Vorthok streets, his rifle spitting plasma bolts at enemy positions. The Vorthok soldiers were tough, but they had been bred for intimidation and overwhelming force. They had never faced opponents who fought with the desperate fury of those protecting their loved ones. "Contact front," called out Private Sujin Yoon, her weapon tracking a Vorthok heavy trooper. Big Ugly at 2 o'clock. The enemy soldier was twice the size of a human, his exoskeleton bristling with weapon systems. But size meant nothing when, facing Earth's children, Park's squad moved like a pack of wolves, flanking the creature from 3 sides, while Yoon kept it distracted with suppressing fire. Captain Yun-Su Lee fought alongside her Marines. Her command suits enhanced targeting system, picking out enemy weak points with surgical precision. The Vorthok had underestimated human tactical flexibility. Where they saw chaos, humans saw opportunity. Every street corner became a fortified position, every building a potential ambush site. Supreme Commander Thokfer watched from his command bunker as human forces carved through his defenses like a hot knife through ice. His best troops, the elite guard regiment that had never known defeat, were being systematically destroyed by these relentless Deathworlders. "Sir, the humans have breached the outer perimeter," his aide reported, mandibles clicking with fear. "They're moving toward the government district." Thakfer closed his 4 eyes in defeat. He had commanded the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had crushed dozens of civilizations beneath his boots. But the humans had taught him something he never expected to learn. There was always a bigger predator. The final assault on the hegemony's command center lasted 6 hours. Human Marines fought through corridors designed to channel attackers into killing zones, turned the Vorthok's own defenses against them, and showed a level of tactical innovation that defied every military doctrine in the galaxy. When Captain Yun-Su Lee finally kicked down the doors to Thokver's command chamber, she found the Supreme Commander waiting for her, his weapons laid aside in surrender. "I yield," he said in broken English, his proud voice reduced to a whisper. "My forces are defeated. Do what Deathworlders do to the conquered." Admiral Dong Heinley arrived by shuttle within the hour, accompanied by a full diplomatic team. Formal surrender ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who had never imagined the mighty Vorthok hegemony could be brought to its knees. Thukver knelt before the human admiral, expecting execution or enslavement. Instead, Admiral Lee did something that shocked every observer. He reached down and helped the defeated commander to his feet. "You fought with honor," Lee said, his words translated instantly by the universal communicators. "Your tactics were sound, your soldiers brave.
Wow.
Now we fight together to rebuild what was destroyed." The concept was alien to the Vorthok mindset. In their culture, defeat meant death or slavery. The idea that enemies could become allies was beyond their understanding. But as the weeks passed, they began to see what humans meant. The Terran Defensive Alliance wasn't about conquest or domination. It was about protection, about ensuring that what had happened to the Kithora could never happen again. Former Vorthok generals found themselves working alongside human tacticians, sharing their knowledge of galactic threats and defensive strategies. Captain Toyoung Choi stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the massive orbital platform that now served as the Alliance's headquarters. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see ships from a dozen different species working together to patrol the star lanes. Her daughter Hai-Zhen had grown up during the war years, and now served as a cultural liaison between human and alien populations. The young woman had a gift for languages that amazed even the Cathera, who were natural linguists. "Mom, come see this," Hai-Zhen called out from across the observation lounge. She was surrounded by a group of alien children, teaching them to play a traditional Korean game while they taught her their own cultural traditions. Saw Young smiled, remembering her father's words from long ago. The strongest warrior is the one who protects the innocent. He would have been proud to see what his granddaughter had become. Below them, on the surface of Kithra Prime, the first human city outside of Sol System was taking shape. Sprawled across the landscape, its architecture a fascinating blend of human engineering and Kithra artistic sensibilities. The streets buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy came to trade, learn, and build together. In the residential districts, something remarkable was happening. Human children played alongside young Kithora, and even some Vorthok offspring whose parents had chosen to join the Alliance. The playground equipment had been designed to accommodate different body types and gravity preferences, creating a space where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Admiral B's final report to Earth was transmitted on a secure channel, but its contents would eventually become public knowledge. "Mission accomplished," he wrote. "We went to space to save strangers and came back with family. The galaxy is no longer a place where the strong prey upon the weak. It's become something better. It's become home." The massive shipyards in orbit around Kithra Prime worked continuously, but the vessels they produced were different from the warships that had fought the Vorthok. These were exploration ships, rescue vessels, and mobile hospitals. The Alliance's mission was clear: explore the galaxy, help those in need, and ensure that genocide could never again threaten innocent civilizations. President Chang Wukong visited the Kithara system for the first anniversary of the Alliance's founding. As he walked through the streets of New Seoul, surrounded by beings from a dozen different worlds, he realized that humanity had found something they had been searching for throughout their history. "We're not alone anymore," he told the gathered crowd during his speech. "And more importantly, no one else has to be alone, either. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, but it's also full of friends we just haven't met yet." The children in the crowd cheered, their voices creating a harmony that transcended species barriers. Human laughter mixed with Kithara harmonics and Vorthok rumbling sounds of approval. It was the sound of a new future being born. As the twin suns of the Kithora system set behind the orbital platforms, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the galaxy settled into its new reality. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors, but as protectors. They had kept their promise to answer the call for help, and in doing so, had created something unprecedented in galactic history. The strong now protected the weak. The hunters had become guardians. And in the vast darkness of space, hope burned. Brighter than any star, the galaxy would never be the same. That was exactly how the humans wanted it. The end.